Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Google Cloud Security Office Hours with a live tour of Chronicle's latest release. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community, and I'm thrilled to be here with Andy Shepard, who will be taking you through the content today and answering your questions. We also have a couple members of the cloud security team who will be joining you in the chat. And before diving into the content, just a reminder that questions are encouraged. So please feel free to add those into the YouTube chat box. You'll find that on the right of the screen that you're watching now. And we'll either get to them in the chat or at the end of the presentation. We also had a few pre-submitted questions that we will cover as well. And for any questions that we don't get to, please, we encourage you to utilize the cloud security community. And the link to that is in the YouTube description. And someone from the community or the Google Cloud team will be happy to help you out. All right, with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Don't be shy in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And I'll hand it over to you, Andy, to take us through the content today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lauren. Yep. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Andy Shepard. I am a global solutions architect for Google Cloud Security, specifically working in the SecOps suite, which we would typically refer to as SOAR and SIEM and threat intel and a few other good things. And it's the platform we'll be looking at today. Okay. So essentially, yes, we're looking at Chronicle. Chronicle is the overall name for the suite. Again, people may know this as Chronicle SIEM and Chronicle SOAR. For us, it's just Chronicle, it's part of the SecOps platform. And that's what we'll be looking at today. And we just have one slide, really, before we go in. We'll just talk about this for a few minutes. And it's about the modern approach to basically threat detection, incident response. Now, when we start to look at lifecycle management from Gartner or SANS, people talk about the threat lifecycle. It's very much prepare, identify, detect, and respond. And what we're looking at today is the two parts of Chronicle. So SIEM is typically what we talk about detection. Patterns, signatures, threat intel, petabytes of storage, and so on. That's very much in the audit and detection space. And then SOAR is where we look in the response space predominantly. So what happens when we get that alert? Do we communicate with people? Do we run a playbook? Do we block? What's the value of SOAR for me? Is this a standardized work queue? Is it about time savings? Is it about risk reduction? We'll look at some of those in a second. But merging it together, we end up with the Chronicle Suite. And really, we have a few key points here. So one of them is that this is a unified all-in-one-place solution. So when I say all in one place, that means we have the logs from SIEM. It's the log configuration. It's the log storage. It's the case management. So when things get raised and grouped into cases. It's user and asset enrichment. When we've enriched that data, it's the kind of data we're presenting to you in a case. So when you're looking at your case in Chronicle SecOps, I can see that user and the asset because we've been fetching that data already. So it's, whilst we don't necessarily, we're not the database for the data, we're the UI showing it to you to save you clicking around. We have the threat intel. We have collaboration with people in your business. I often like to talk about this collaboration about being delegating and deputizing tasks. Sometimes we may just have one approval action in a playbook that we can ship off to somebody outside of the SOC, maybe an HR or a legal or a finance question about whether we can do something or whether we can't do something. Giving that question to the person that knows the context about the asset that we're dealing with, or sometimes handing the case off to somebody entirely. So it's very much a workflow platform there for collaboration and communication, tagging people, notifying people, sending emails, sending approval links over Slack, Teams, Google Chat, etc. It's also our dashboard and reporting. So for SOAR, that will look like a day-to-day operations dashboard, and in SIEM that would be about log ingestion health and metrics, and which IOCs and which parts of the world are firing something the most. So it really is a unified platform for all of this together. It's also integrated. We have a marketplace of hundreds of integrations, and basically they're in there. So when we integrate with solutions as part of our process and response, we can reduce toil. We're there to reduce the copy-paste, alt-tab, copy-paste, alt-tab. We're there to improve audit. We're there to reduce process deviation, which reduces mistakes, which reduces risk, because we don't have people doing something by hand when we could have it pre-set as a set of instructions. So it's very much the integration with all of that, but as well with our own threat intel, with Mandiant and VirusTotal, bringing two of the best threat intels on the planet together with the Chronicle SecOps Suite, as well as lots of other solutions. As I've just mentioned, we have the applied threat intelligence. I've been working in SOAR for quite a few years now, and other solutions as well. And we quite often see a thing that says, my threat intel says bad, but why is it bad? So by using applied threat intel, and we'll see a little demo of that later, when we start to see a hash or a threat actor group, what does that actually mean? How can we take that knowledge and then start to apply it back into the SecOps suite and know what to go looking for? And finally is the AI augmented productivity. So Google, we announced that next a few weeks ago, something called Duet AI, and it's something that runs in parallel with a lot of our security suite. You may have seen it. I think I saw it the other day in my Gmail pop up for the first time, which was great. But we also have implementations in the Chronicle SecOps suite. So for SIEM, that would be a way to actually help you type in a human sentence and have that converted to the search syntax. I think the example they used at Next was crypto mining currency type attacks in my GCP in this time period with this extra attribute. And the user typing this in, they don't necessarily know UDM syntax. They don't know the keywords and the ands and the ors and the brackets, but they're able to type in a sentence, have AI convert that into syntax and run that. So a nice way to constantly lower the barrier of skill set needed for someone to actually get value out of the solution. If you're a tier 3 and a senior analyst, fantastic. You know all the keywords and all the shortcuts. Someone in tier 1, then we're trying to reduce that learning curve and get them value much earlier. In SOAR, when we talk about Duet AI, we're talking about the ability to explain a case. Again, we'll see an example in the actual demo, but just to summarize it, we may have 5 alerts as part of one case with 100 different event attributes. Again, a senior analyst will spend time and go through every single key value pair and go hunting through a terabyte of logs. Your tier 1 or a SOC manager might not. So how can we take all of that data in one go and summarize it in one paragraph with the key standout points? Again, it's about reducing that skill barrier, increasing time to value. And then with threat intel, with the Duet AI, we're trying to summarize threats into something very manageable, very digestible. With all the threat intel reports coming out all the time, it can create a backlog for any company with tracking millions of hashes and IPs and threat actor groups and so on to get around to summarizing that. But imagine an AI module that's basically parsing that near real time, the latest data, not having to wait a few weeks for an analyst to kind of come through and read a 20-page report and combine it with all the other 20-page reports. So some really great utilizations there of AI to really, time to value and lowering the skill set. So we can see all the bit of that in the demo today, which is great. So now I'm going to swap over to the actual platform. There we go. Good. A smile from Lauren. That tells me it's sharing fantastically. Okay, so what does the platform look like? So this is our platform, really. This is the unified UI. This is everything together. So starting from the left-hand side, we have the menu. Quite simply, if we just minimize some of this, this is our main layout of data. So we have groups like investigation, where we want to go searching. You can see in here we have the SIEM search, so log searching, but also case management searching. So if we know the case and the investigation, or if we know this is just a simple hash, then we might take different search paths. Under detection, we would have what we typically think about as SIEM. So log ingestion, log parsing. Here we have the rule sets. So we have the rules editor, where we can start to put in our own syntax and start some really good stuff. We have the curated detection, which is the alerts that come with the actual platform, and things like rule dashboards and activity dashboards. We also have the alert pages. It may be that some of the activities in my box are raising low severity alerts, and we don't need to turn that into a case. We don't have a process for it, but we still want to tag it as a low-level alert. So we have alerts in here as well. as well as our risk analytics, behavior type, and that's obviously running on the SIEM data. So that's all my detection and my analysis. We then have the response section, which is where we talk traditionally about things that you would consider more SOAR-like. So we have the playbooks, we have the integration setups. So here with all the different playbooks we can drill into, setting up my integrations and how we call those API things, including custom code and so on. We have dashboards. So again, SIEM dashboards and SOAR dashboards. SOAR dashboards very much, what is my team doing today? If we just load a bit more data in, what's hot, what's cold, what's big, what's quiet? Is my alert reduction percentage high today, which means everything's going well? Is my alert reduction low, in which case maybe we're getting a variety of alerts in today that we're not quite used to? Is there critical, or what's important? How are my different teams? How is it assigned to them? Is tier 1 overloaded, but tier 2 is running quite empty? So for me, SOAR dashboard's about understanding the team, whereas a SIEM dashboard is more about, well, what kind of logs are we getting in? Are we still getting in from all those different log sources we would expect to be getting from? So obviously the SIEM dashboards there based upon Looker, which is the Google BI tool. Some really good stuff for us there. We also from here have the incident manager. This is our crisis management module. This is how we track things that are no longer just an alert that have just run a playbook. If we get a confirmed breach or something we actually have to investigate, maybe we would consider pushing a case to here. And then we can start adding in legal or HR or my incident response team. Maybe we have an external consulting incident response team. And this is where we can invite them to do actual crisis management, which then is about communication, collaboration outside of your organization. We have the marketplace in the left menu. This is where we integrate with the hundreds of different solutions in as part of the SOAR response, from threat intel, database, WAF, sandbox, Google Cloud, multi-SIEM, multi-communication, and so on. And then the settings page. Obviously, this is all very RBAC, very role dependent. So I see all this because I'm a senior analyst on the box, but yeah, if we have someone that's just a dev or just wearing the dev hat, then maybe they would see the rule page and the playbook editor. An analyst may see the search and the case queue, and a sysadmin may see the settings pages. So it's all very curated, the menu as to what we're looking at. But today, I'm basically wearing every hat. I'm the super user, so that's why we get to see everything. So with that brief walkthrough of the user interface, I thought it'd be good to spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes actually going through an example of, well, how does this work from an analyst perspective? So I often refer back to my days as a SOC team lead, and I turn up at 8:30 in the morning or 9 in the morning with a coffee in the hand. And how would I start to use the platform? Well, we start off with the SOAR dashboard. As I've mentioned, what's hot, what's cold, what's busy, what's quiet, what's the stance of the team, and all my kind of sub teams and who's busy doing what. After that, we go to our cases page. So our cases page is everything open on the box that I have permission to. So again, using RBAC, there are 16 cases, small number because this is just a demo box, but there are 16 cases that I am entitled to see. That could be because a case is assigned to me specifically. We can see here we have AR and GS and T1. These are the assignees. So some cases are assigned to me, whereas some cases are assigned to my role as a tier 3 analyst. So I have 16 there. We can, of course, start to filter these based upon where they came from, the severity, if we've tagged them as particular keywords that interest me. So we can go through, but it's still quite a list. So what can the platform do to actually curate that to a more specific list for me to do? Well, from the menu, we can click on Your Work Desk. So now we're taking all of those cases that have arisen from all of the logs, doing all of that automation and playbook building and processing, and actually present to me a version of this that is specific to me. What is my to-do list? So first off, we can see all the cases that are assigned to me or to my role. And here we have 3 cases that I was working on yesterday. We can see the severity, how old they are, and so on. We also have pending actions. So we'll see the playbooks in a couple of minutes. But a pending action is where a playbook has been processing an alert, it has stopped and it wants a human decision. So if we actually just take a stop here for 1 second, just to kind of frame this and really frame back SOAR is the bigger picture. When I go back to my SOC days, I would group alerts into 3 kind of high-level logical buckets. Some of my alerts were just noise. They had to come to me for political or technical reasons, but they were just noise to be validated and closed. The second type of alert was validation type alerts. The alert is real, we have a process, we know the process very well, but a human has to review it, either before we close it, or a human has to approve before we block or reset or disable something. Obviously, there's a risk appetite question there. But fundamentally, I'm approving it, but I don't need to do the work by hand. This is a very well-established process. The third bucket was unknown. Maybe this is something where we don't have a mature process yet. Maybe this is an alert type that we've never received before, and therefore we've not had a chance to build the process. Or maybe it was a known alert type where actually something about it just looked a little bit different, and therefore we wanted a human to take over. So we have these 3 buckets. Now, by using the SOAR platform and SecOps, the playbooks that we'll see in a second, they help me reduce bucket number 1 completely automatically. So 2 examples I used to have, that people may have heard before if you've ever seen this kind of demo, is we used to get a lot of alerts for CVEs that were 7 years old. We may have been bad at patch management, but we weren't quite that bad. So if the CV, we could check the name and the description, and based upon some things, we would just close it automatically. It's either a false positive or something similar. The second type of noise we would get is a DDoS with 1 packet. So again, some really bad alerting quality that was coming to the SOC team. And every customer, every company will have their own set of noisy alerts that they just basically validate and close as quick as they can. So by using playbooks, we can design a little bit of logic. If alert count is less than 5, close. If the CV is very old, close. If that impossible traveler is coming from one of our known approved VPN exit points, close. This is just noise. I still need the audit trail. I still need the inputs and the outputs and the logs and everything in this nice case in case we do a retro inspection of the case, of course, and the playbook will do that for me. But I don't want my humans to spend time on it. I don't want them being mentally distracted. I don't want them clicking. I don't want them taking away from what they should be doing, which is adding value to the team. So by using playbooks, they're handled automatically. The second group of alerts I mentioned, the validation, well, this is what we're seeing here. So every time a playbook stops on a question and wants help, we can see here we've got a Zimbra collaboration. So this is an external scan that found a CVE. We have a malware, and we have network activity. For each of these cases, case 130, 127, and 103, because the playbook is waiting for my approval, by clicking on respond, I'm presented with a color-coded enrichment of all the entities, and in this case, the playbook is asking to take one of these 5 routes. Now, the routes can be anything, and it doesn't even matter what happens next. As the analyst, it's not important what happens next. It's an approved process that's been designed and deployed, so I know the process is correct. Here, I see from the colors that we have a malicious hash. We have an IP that's inside my organization because the icon's being colored in blue. We have a domain or a user that's not as one of my entities because the icon isn't colored in. So very quickly, my host, my network, guest, malicious hash. I know what this case is just from the color and the iconography, so I can make a decision. Next case, Zimbra, respond. Okay, I know the URL, I know the server, I can see the CVE from here. Let's take the manual remediation option. IRC connection, respond. Malicious external IP, internal IP. Oh, external user, again, maybe a guest or a partner's visiting my site and they've done something. Okay, let's choose a path that escalates it to a contact to go and have a chat with them because of who they are or the network they're on. So with this pending actions, by raising those questions to the top, we've sorted in those million logs that were overnight. We found the 100 that were important. Those 100 have gone to SOAR. SOAR's built the case. SOAR's presented me with those very finite questions. And within 5 minutes, we've not only closed group 1 of alerts, but we've also closed group 2 because we've approved the playbook to do whatever it wanted to do next. My days, I had 199 useless IDS tickets every day. One of them was really good. This would have saved me 4 hours a day, half of my life. Oh, if only. So this is the pending actions. From the created list, we can also see my tasks. So this is where a human has given me a task to do, which is in addition to the playbook. So here, somebody wants me to do a search, and they've assigned this to the admin role or to the tier 3 role. Here, somebody wants a peer review. We can also log requests. So where an alert is very much an alert-driven playbook, by using a request, we can also trigger known processes to block or disable or start an investigation. So we can now do service type requests as well as alert-driven processes. So very much like a bit of a self-service portal there for SOC analysts to have some really nice quick processes to kick off, as well as a scratch pad and an announcements page. So in the morning, I see the case as I go to my work desk, we approve everything, and we're very happy. But what if one of those wasn't so easy to respond to? How do we dig even deeper? How do we go to that third bucket, which is real investigation and management? Well, here, if we see the EDR malware, we can open the case. And from opening the case, what we see is a few tabs. So we have here at 1519, probably a bit small on the screen, but we had this EDR malware detected. This was because one of the alerts through the SIEM triggered something. One of the YARAs fired or one of the threat intels fired and raised the alert in SOAR. From that alert, we ran a very specific playbook. A playbook has a trigger, activities, blocks, which is a playbook in a playbook, and purple is a condition. Sometimes it's automatic. So if severity is critical, then take path 1. But also we can have a human question. And this is that pending action we were talking about. So this playbook has done everything, decided not to close, and now wants a human to make the decision. And we're also rendering the graph. So this is the actual log and the entity association in the SIEM. So we can basically see here, if I just zoom out for 1 second, as we start to click on entities, we can see all the raw logs that triggered this. We can open them up. Let's just expand this. EDR, and here we go. So now we have the raw log as it came to the SIEM. So this is everything that happened that triggered the alert. We then raised the alert, which was part of the event. We automatically ran the playbook. But as an analyst, I don't want to see all of that. Very visual, it's very confusing. It's just so many things to look at. So really, I'm going to present you with an overview page. The overview page is how we've put together all of those findings, all of those enrichments, all of that threat intel and risk and asset enrichments into a one-page digestible. So for this alert, we have 2 outstanding questions, and we saw these on the front page. Do you want to contain? Yes or no? Should we remediate automatically, or should we escalate? Now, to answer that question, and this is the next thing that's required in this alert, we can then drill down to the alert details. We see that because the attack had a MITRE attack ID, I can actually explain to you what this alert is. If you're familiar with the alert, you don't need to read this, but sometimes we get a new alerts in that we've not seen before. In this playbook, in this part of the network, we also use an endpoint, one of our EDR integrations. So we've enriched the host to say, well, who owns that host? What's the operating system? Tell me everything from my EDR side about this host. We can see a slightly more detailed version of the entities in this case. So again, we have the external, internal, and high risk. We have virus total and Mandiant threat intel as part of my overview. So rather than just saying virus total marks this as malicious, I actually want to know why it's malicious. So expanding this widget, we can see the VT augment slide. We can see the hash, the name, the metadata attributes. We can see which engines fire as malicious, and the breakdown about all the different meta, static analysis, dynamic analysis that VT can give me. We can see related IOCs. We can start to look at VT recognized attribution and different signatures and campaigns. On the Mandiant side, and where we see VirusTotal as the biggest repository of threat intel on the planet, we then have Mandiant to complement that as being one of the deepest. So it has the most thorough analysis from all of our threat researchers and IR engagements across the world together in a repo where, obviously some things we publish, some things we can't, but also the threat intel there. So we can see the hash in part of this alert has been enriched. We have an association to a threat group or a file campaign. We've also further down enriched the malware strain details. So Hangman v2 runs on Windows, captures hostname and exfiltrates data. We have associations with threat actor groups. So APT43 is known to use Hangman v2, and we tell you about APT43. And just like VirusTotal for all of these widgets, we simply can open up the tab and then start to see what does Mandiant know about APT43. Obviously, this is just one sample. I'm not particularly picking on the group, but do we want to go through their MITRE breakdown, a graph of their entities, similar indicators that we can start looking for or searching? What's the campaign? What's the history of the group? Who have they mixed with? What's their method of attack? Who do they target? Are they after energy verticals? Are they there for ransomware? Are they there to make money, or are they there for to violate my websites and my resources? Is it a publicity stunt, or is this money driven, or is this IP driven? Which obviously then helps determine what we do next with this threat intel. And so on. So this is one alert. And this really is pulling together, as we've said, we've got endpoint, we've got user enrichments, we've got threat intel, we've got MITRE attack in there. But what interestingly happened is this was at 1519. At 1522, we actually had a different alert come to the Chronicle platform. This is a crypto mining alert. So in this case, we had a different event. We ran a different playbook. We have a different graph of SIEM entities based upon the alerts and the assets in there. But the overview page is telling me a different story. We have a different question. We have different assets. Here, because we're talking about my cloud infrastructure, we can start enriching assets from Google Cloud. So who's the owner of the asset? What service accounts are on the box? What's the processor type? Scrolling down, we can see more MITRE mitigations and descriptions, as well as asking SEC what known misconfigurations are on this box. Here we can see we have one medium outstanding misconfiguration on the box that happened to trigger a different type of alert. So if we scroll down, we can start to see what that is. Okay, wide SSH keys allowed. Is that relevant? Let's start digging into that. Now, because this alert came in and it shared something in common with the first alert, we're actually going to create you a case. So this means one analyst in the top right has one case called crypto mining. And this one case is actually an amalgamation of two alerts. And here's one of the first uses of AI today, and this is the Duet AI Investigation tab. So by looking through all of the events, we can see here we had 2 events inside 2 alerts in 7 entities. And AI has basically said to me, the reason why you probably want to look at this, and here's my big 3 bullet points. A crypto miner was detected on the host. Second, EDR detected malware execution in this file. Thirdly, a YORL was executed on this host, and the rule detected suspicious process was carrying on. So these are the 3 bullet points. Then AI starts to tell me a bit of more of a paragraph-orientated chain of events, like how did we get into this situation? So we start to read all the key value pairs, but also the description in the alert signature. So we understand also why this alert fired and what the author of that signature was trying to look for. And then on the right, we start to provide some entry-level steps on what you should do next. Quarantining the host, looking at the malwares on the box, and remediating the file types. And the reason why we do this, again, if this is a process you do all day, every day, you probably don't need this. But when we're talking about new alert types, things you haven't seen before, maybe you're looking after a host that you've not had to work for before in that business, and all of this is across industry best practice, so that as a SOC manager or a CISO just logging into this ticket without having to dig through all the different alerts, reading through all the different event keys, looking at what the playbook does, looking at the overview. This is just a 10-second, everything you need to know about the case. And again, if it's not a process you know, it's a great start to really, again, time to value, time to closure. So this is our case wall. As we said, within each alert, we can go to the questions, make the decision and close, or ultimately we can fall back to a ticketing platform. So in here, just like a standard ticketing solution, we have date stamps, usernames, we can type to each other, tag each other, we can add file attachments, mixed rich text in there, again, so tables, images, evidence, and so on. We can assign mini tasks to each other with deadlines. Here we can see that Andy Shepherd assigned a job to the admin and said, please do a quick deep dive search on this. So we can fall back here, but even if you fall back here, all of the work has been done for you because the playbooks have been doing that enrichment. They've been querying the user. They've been looking up threat intel and asset databases and querying an SQL server for additional context. As I said earlier, they've also been sending out emails, sending hyperlink questions over Slack and Teams and Google Chat and ServiceNow tickets and so many other ways of sending out contextual questions to people that know the asset we're involved with, getting their input, tagging that into the case wall, and showing that in the overview page. So as an analyst, I've seen my work queue, I've seen my alerts, I saw the pending action, I've drilled down here. I think I know what I want to do, but I want to go even deeper into the question. So from here, we have my nice simple overview. I scroll down. I see that the hash in question, this A6055, let's go explore. So as we hit the explore button, we now start to see the SIEM and the logs. And now we're using the power of what people would typically call Chronicle SIEM, querying terabytes of data or petabytes of data very, very fast. So this is using the Google core infrastructure. Side fun fact, it's on something called Borg, if anyone's not seen any of our main stage presentations. Basically, Chronicle's been around for a good few years in development and was powered upon the kind of core level of Google. So really great computing power there. What that means is, as well as very fast searches over all the data, it's about the amount of data that we're able to search. So our standard is 12 months hot data. That's not warm, that's not cold, that's not retrieval processes, that's 12 months of hot data by standard. And by doing that, by searching that, we can search this hash across all of my data set, and we can now see here the activity of this type of file hash. On the right, we can see all the assets involved. Maybe this hash wasn't raising alerts before, but we have the logs from all of my different tools, whether that's cloud infrastructure, endpoint, proxy, firewall, and so on. So we can start to view a really nice timeline, or we can just drill down and say, well, Lynn Minor looks a bit more interesting. Let's go to its first observed. So now on the left-hand side, we have all the key metadata, and we can start to view the meta attributes and the risk score from virus total and so on. But let's just go straight to the raw data. From here, we can see the raw data on the left and our parsed UDM on the right. UDM is our naming schema. It applies across all of our parsers, and it basically is our common naming schema. So we have a normalization level there, which obviously helps Yara rule writing, but also helps the case management. If I just make that a tiny bit bigger. So from here, we can start to see, scroll a little bit, we can see all the UDM. So this is really interesting. We had a host running excel.exe that triggered a SHA-256 hash. We can also see it was on Windows and the file path and all the extra metadata that Windows reported to me. So we can start to say, well, in that case, I want to copy the search syntax of the IP, but also the hash, which is this one here. And let's just copy that, copy UDM, pivot into the search page. We can start typing in my syntax and looking for all the events from this host using this hash. And here we can see we have one event. We can start to look at the timeline, the prevalence of the entity. Is this entity being used by everybody if we take this off? From here, we have all the event hits on the bottom right, but also we can start to turn that into a pivot if I want to start summing. So show me all the activity of this hash, but now sum it by the process name that actually triggered it. Or do me a unique count on how many hosts that have had this hash over the last week. So we can start to turn that into usable data as well to actually understand very large data sets within a single UI. So that's basically where we're going to get to today, really. So hopefully we've tried to show you that in one UI, which is the Chronicle SecOps platform suite, what we've looked at is that we've got one browser. We have detection and response, detection being log ingestion, the Yara rules, the threat intel, and the response has been carried out by the SOAR playbooks and the case overview. We've single-clicked all the way from our case page, which is my work desk here. We saw that we have an outstanding question in a case, one-click pivot to the case, one-click pivot on the hash, and then we're straight into the raw logs of everything from, again, petabytes of data and summing that up into a useful way. We've touched upon the threat intel as part of Chronicle SecOps. So with the Mandiant deep knowledge set, but also the virus total for the largest repo in the world. And also briefly touched upon collaboration and communication. Yeah. So that's the demo as we see it today, and obviously all the AI and the different ways we have that. So Lauren, that leaves us about 20 minutes for Q&A. Happy to share the screen again if we need to, but yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this overview and demonstration, and thank you all for your questions. So before diving into those questions, we do have just a few resources to share with you. So keep the questions coming and we'll be sure to get to them. But here's just a high-level overview of where you can discover cloud security best practices and tutorials with that first link in the knowledge base. We've also dropped a link to the new to Chronicle blog series that our team works on, which you'll find helpful information, tips, and tutorials demonstrating different features of Chronicle itself. So I encourage you to check that out. Secondly, we've recently launched the cloud security community, which you can find at that second link and also by scanning the QR code. So if you're running into questions, you want to stay up to date on future sessions like this, that's where you'll be able to do exactly that. And you can engage with each other, your peers, and Googlers in two-way discussion forums. Lastly, we have a feedback form that will drop into the chat where we'd love to hear your feedback on this session, or if you have any suggestions for future topics or sessions that we should host. So we'd love to hear from you. It should only take 30 seconds to a minute to complete that. And then a couple of upcoming events that we have, in particular, one on security, privacy, and risk in the world of Gen AI. That's on the 25th. So we'd love to see you there, and you can check out all of the upcoming events at that fourth link. Okay, without any further ado, we'll jump into your questions. So we did have a few pre-submitted questions, which I think will help other folks that are on the call. You might be having similar questions. So we'll cover a few of those and then dive right into the chat. Okay, so our first question is, how would we go about a migration from Splunk?
Fantastic. So so some customers want to do this themselves. Some customers want to be partner-led. And if some of our partners focus very much on deliverables rather than just, complete use case package deliverables, so our use case is this, and therefore they will work out exactly how that migration happens. So different customers will have different paths there. But at the technical level, there's really 2 or 3 things to do. One of them is that some data would, instead of going to Splunk in this question, although obviously what I'm talking about here is the same as any migration away, would be pointing those logs to Chronicle SIEM instead. Now, for some customers, Splunk is being used really, and I don't mean this to be competitive or aggressive, but a lot of companies are actually using Splunk more for just business data operations than really for security telemetry. So if we start to move the security data away, it helps lower the budget and the costings for the other SIEM that we're talking about, whichever that is. But for some customers that are using it for purely security, then it would be a case about pointing the data over to Chronicle SIEM. So number one is basically just point the data to a new destination. Obviously, we also have agent collectors and forwards and log handling. The details are different, but the concept is really fundamentally the same. The second thing to do would be is if you have playbooks using Splunk Phantom, we would look at those and how they would map. Unfortunately, because the platforms are so different, the playbooks will look different. I have been involved in a few migrations from playbooks over, and in all the ones I've done, which is a few, it's not hundreds, but it's a few, our playbooks ended up being simpler and actually just easier. And that's because our actions are based upon, in the playbook side, our actions are based upon a point rather than just being an API call. So we don't just map every API from every vendor to an action, because you've still then got to build the logic yourself. We try to make the actions more like, well, detonate this file. However many API calls that takes, detonate the file, get me the results. So I usually find the playbooks look a bit simpler when they move across, but that's something to consider. And then the third thing would be, who do you integrate with? If you integrate with Active Directory or Azure or Google Cloud or Threat Intel, just copy the API keys across. So yeah, not too big a job. Suppose it depends what you're moving away from, but yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that explanation. All right. How will threat intelligence integrate into each of the Chronicle package types? What does it mean when findings are enriched with virus total context?
Yeah, so if I've understood this question correctly, one of the things that we do in Chronicle SIEM is the ability to, when we get logs in, we actually start to map context data to it. So rather than doing enrichments on demand when you do a search, we're actually mapping that data as it comes in. So what that means is that threat intel data can be kind of, it's not left joined, but you kind of get the thing going there. It's kind of joined on as it goes into the kind of into the storage. So what that means is we're enriching the file that we know about with additional data. And that means that when we start to do Yara rule writing, we can use additional context as part of the signature, which is a really powerful feature. I don't know if it's many SIEMs or any SIEMs do that the way we do it, but it leads to much better rule management and much better scalability. So I think that's what you're talking about. I hope that helps. And how do we go into the different Chronicle package types? So I think I've seen one question in the list that's a bit similar. I don't want to go too specifics on pricing and packaging, but we're looking to do basically 3 packages, which will be low, medium, high. They will have different names, but again, I'm not going to go too much into the details. Basically, the packages are very much kind of an entry level for people that just want to see them in a bit of SOAR. We then have a more fully packaged version, which will have threat intel in there, AI in there. And then we'll have the third package, which is basically the entire Google stack of security. So there's a lot more that goes into that suite. And that's really our kind of higher price, but also a lot more functionality in there. So yes, look at the different packages for the level of threat intel that goes with that. And there's your answer.
Great. Okay, well, let's hop over to some of the live questions. Thanks again for submitting these. So this was asked at the beginning of the presentation when you were just starting out your demo. So will the logs be stored in log buckets or the SIEM?
Yeah, so I think if I've understood right, it depends on which logs we're talking about. If you have a traditional on-prem technology that creates like a log feed, that would be sent to the forwarder sends it to our SIEM, and therefore it's stored inside Chronicle. When you say with log buckets, though, there are some solutions, some cloud solutions, that don't necessarily do it in the same way. I'm thinking of some of the big cloud providers. What they would do is they would actually collect their own logs inside a bucket, and then we would ingest that. So we have a job, effectively, that runs inside Chronicle SIEM that will scrape that bucket for new data. So yeah, so some will go via a log bucket before they're ingested into the SIEM. Some will go direct to SIEM. So log buckets are not always required, but depending on the vendor, that might be one of the paths you take.
Makes sense. Great. Okay, we had one just come in. When is the new unified solution set to be released to existing customers? And just before you respond, I will drop the link to the blog of the announcement blog so that you can have that as a reference.
Okay. Yes, that kind of question makes me nervous because I don't like speaking on behalf of PM. So yes, there are 2 phases. There are new customers being deployed who are in the new SecOps UI. And then, yes, we have customers that are already established, they're in production, they will go through a path. I'm hearing that it's probably in the early next year. But again, that's just a very open comment. Please don't take that as set in stone. It may come forward, it may go backwards. But yeah, we're looking at hopefully a couple of months when we might be able to start that. But again, I'm not going to talk solidly on behalf of the PM. So soon, hopefully.
Makes sense. And you can always keep track on the release notes and our product updates on the blog. So do, stay posted there. And we just dropped the link to the original announcement where there's additional links and resources that you can check out from there. Okay. So we had a few different questions around MSSPs. So one in particular is how to enable multi-tenant when you have an MSSP or a managed security service provider.
Sure. So I think the multi-tenancy feature set is something that evolves. If you look at multi-tenancy now back a year ago and 2 years ago and today, there are always new things coming out. Currently, we would be looking at a few different SIEM instances. So you might have one SIEM per end customer of the MSSP. But then on top of that, we would have a single Chronicle SOAR. The SecOps Unified UI that we've seen today is an enterprise UI. The stage 1 of this was for enterprise. The stage 2, which we're looking at, in the coming months and next year, will actually be the MSSP version. So the architecture is one SIEM per customer and one SOAR. But from a unified UI point of view, that's something we're addressing hopefully next year. But again, something I'm very excited for. Yes.
Great. Okay. So one question is, during your demo, you were demonstrating several different features. So there was a question if we can get any resources showing the features or that left panel of Chronicle. I've dropped a link to the New to Chronicle blog series, which I think will be helpful for you. But Andy, any other recommendations you might have?
Yes, there is a community edition, like a very cut back cloud version for people who are not ready to do a POC that they can get if they go through the community page. That might be a great way to see it. I don't know if the community version is unified UI yet. That's the only small caveat. What I would say is that at this point in time, what we've done with this unified UI is we've unified authentication, a lot of the RBAC. We've put a lot of the flows in single clicks and a lot easier to pivot between the interface. The feature sets themselves, they're still in there. There's still SIEM and there is still SOAR. So a lot of the pages will look really similar. So it's not like by doing this, we've completely changed what it is that happens within there, but what we've done is made it into a single platform. So I think that's what we're really talking about today. So if you know SIEM and SOAR, as of today, you'll be already quite familiar with what's in that menu panel. Yeah, like I say, a lot of the work is more about the federated authentication and the way that the UI flows. And obviously, this paves the way for lots of new features coming soon, which I'm very excited about.
Absolutely. And kind of going off of that theme of the integration and unified UI, we do have some other questions around that point. So here from John, great to see you, Andy. Have you got any detail on how Mandiant ASM is integrated into the unified platform? Is it sending a bunch of findings as UDM, or is something else going on here?
Yeah, so there's different ways of doing this. I think one of the other questions I saw was, how is this Mandiant service integrated? I think the thing to remember is that Chronicle SOAR, by its very nature, is designed to do different use cases from different platforms. So even if Mandiant was not a part of Google, and so I'm trying to make this statement about all solutions, we can still integrate, we can still take the data, we can still respond and do playbooks and draw overviews. So the fact that Google Mandiant is part of Google, we can still do all of that. You know, it doesn't mean that we can't do it. Yeah, don't know. I suppose I'm going with that. But the point is, yes, we can. But if the question is asking, do you have any like specific toggle buttons in the UI? Well, no, because the case is still the case. The cases that we looked at today, one of them was a Mandiant ASM. So that was the Zimbra Collaboration Suite vulnerability found. That was a connector where we pulled the raw alert in from ASM straight into Chronicle SOAR, and we started the processing on that. There is work on Mandiant's Advantage modules going straight into Chronicle SIEM. I know a lot of them are, but I don't know the exact list. John, we know each other. Probably send me an email. We can follow that thread. It's good to see you again.
Love it. Okay, keeping the integration thread going. Are Chronicle SIEM and Chronicle SOAR separate products? Can they be used independently or only together? And then kind of going off of that in terms of the packages and licensing.
Yes. So they have basically become one platform. Like I say, we do have a few different price bands and a few different offerings for that, different SKUs. I think it's probably best to talk to your local account manager about that. Yes, I mean the SOAR functionality within Chronicle is multi-SIEM. It is multi-ITSM. It is multi-cloud. So no, it is not restricted to only working with Google products. Like I say, we have a marketplace with hundreds and hundreds of different integrations in from all the different vendors. So the SIEM and the SOAR are not uniquely tied to each other. They still integrate with other things. But how it's licensed, I think that's probably one I'd have to relay to your account manager, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yep. And we just dropped a link if you don't have a direct line to your account team that you can contact us and get more information on all things packaging and pricing. Okay. And on that note, it may be the same answer, but just to bring it up, is there a cost to add VirusTotal integration, or is that now part of Chronicle?
So again, it would go down to the package. Again, there are 3 main packages for the Chronicle platform. The 3 different packages are at different price points for different customers with different appetites for how much technology they get inside that bundle. Some of them do, some of them don't. So is there a separate cost? Well, it depends which package you go for. And again, I'm afraid I have to point you back to the account manager to find the price point that's got the feature set you wanted. So yes, people who historically have had Chronicle SOAR had to bring their own key. That is true. But going forward, people that join into the Chronicle as a SecOps platform, that would be a different answer. But again, depending on which one they choose.
Makes sense. Okay. Now jumping into a little bit more around AI, I'll also drop a link to some of the Duet AI specific resources that you can find so that you can stay up to date on the latest announcements. But will Duet get added to rule building in any capacity instead of just search?
Very much a roadmap question, which I don't like answering on recorded calls. What I will say is that the things that we see in the platform today are very much just what we do today. There are obviously roadmaps for each of the AIs touching all different parts of the system. So if we look at SOAR, the very first implementation only, I say the very first, it's only a few months ago, would basically look at and just summarize it. And then the next version came along that would summarize all the alerts together. And the next version we did this. And so, yes, it's a very hot topic. It's a very big moving area. There are lots of things planned, and I will leave that with a smile. That's very much a roadmap question, but I am smiling.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And again, that link here is in the chat. So you can stay up to date on all things security and our AI offerings there. So bookmark that if you're curious to stay up to date. Okay, we only have a little bit of time left, and I see we just have a couple of questions remaining. So if you do have any others, now is the time. So the next question that we have is, if we already have XDR that can give enrichment of context, do we need to have a SIEM?
It depends on the need of the business. Some customers would say we have it for regulatory reasons. Some would say that it's our policy that we still log for X amount of months. I mean, don't forget, a SIEM is XDR. I'm sure I could start a mini argument with this next comment. Everyone has their own opinion, so this is just my position. XDR is very much firewall and endpoint, and brilliant. But that's not the same as a SIEM. A SIEM is looking at so much more than just endpoint. The XDRs that I've seen and that I've known, but I'm not an XDR expert, they just don't go to the same level of coverage of having hundreds of parsers for hundreds of technologies. They won't do your entire cloud stack, your AD stack, and so on, and all the things that, if you talk to, say, a Mandiant incident responder, they want a lot more logs than just endpoint and firewall, or endpoint and proxy. An investigation is a hell of a lot wider than that. On top of that, things like XDR, you may not have on every single endpoint for security reasons, for licensing reasons. So I think there's a lot of places where the SIEM is still very important, and then there's the regulation side on top. So yes, I would say so, yes, but every customer will have different appetites and requirements there.
Absolutely. Makes sense. And this just in, we have a resource around AI-powered investigation with Chronicle Security Operations. So we just dropped the link to that resource where you can find out more about that offering specifically. So thank you for sharing that. That does bring us to the conclusion of our questions and for this session. So thank you so much again, Andy, for this presentation, for answering so many questions, and everyone for joining us. Again, we've dropped the link into the chat for sharing your feedback in the forum. So we'd love to hear from you about this session and any topics that you have for future. And for any additional questions that we aren't able to get to, please utilize the community and we'll be happy to help you out there. With that said, Andy, any final thoughts or recommendations before we close out today?
No, just have a play. It's amazing. It's a bit cheesy, but it's just good stuff. So yeah, have a play.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all. Thank you for your time. And let's stay in touch in the community. And we hope to see you next time. Hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in the world.